Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading, then from the One Year Bible, and then we examine some questions that extend our learning from the sermon on Sunday. Today I'm joined by Rivenbark and Alyssa Bream, and we're looking at a passage from Mark chapter 3, verses 20 through 30, and I'm going to read maybe 2 or 3 of those, and then we'll talk about the text. Verse 21 says, "When his family heard what was happening, they tried to take him away. He's out of his mind," they said. And then verse 24, he says, "A kingdom divided by civil war will collapse. Similarly, families splintered by feuding will fall apart. And if Satan is divided and fights against himself, how can he stand? He would never survive." So this is one of those passages that Jesus is saying things that raise people's eyebrows. It's hard for me to imagine that Jesus' family thought he was out of his mind. So Jay, you got any insight here?
Well, when you stop and think about the fact that Jesus was spending a significant amount of time wherever he went, casting out demons, you talking about not only spiritual authority on his part, but confronting evil spirits. And there was a lot of things that went on surrounding that. The religious people were looking at him and saying, "How in the world are you doing this? You must be of the devil yourself." I think his family, this is just my opinion, I think his family felt some pressure from the religious people and the culture of that day who were questioning him. I almost see it as if they would have been content with him doing some of the other marvelous miracles, but staying away from that aspect so much. Because I think if there was bleed over the pressure and what was going on in the culture and what they were feeling from that. And the whole issue of selecting disciples and the way he was leading, it doesn't seem like that would have been the great model to establish a worldwide kingdom or church. But when you read that passage, though, where it talks about his family, it does bear out this. He's out of his mind. That's a pretty broad and powerful statement for them to make. But there's a lot of history going on that I think contributed to that at the time.
There was a lot of tension here, right, Alyssa?
Yeah, there was a lot of conflicting tension. There wasn't just Jesus's tension with his family that didn't quite understand the true depth of his calling. There was tension growing in ministry. That's something that causes tension within the people you're leading, with growth. Anytime there's growth, there's tension. There was tension with the religious leaders of the time because Jesus was teaching and doing things that they didn't agree with. Jesus had to demonstrate patience and trust and forgiveness throughout all of this tension and all of this time. And I think that helps us and that challenges us to consider how we deal with tension when we're dealing with family strife, when we're dealing with fractured relationships, when we're dealing with accusations about our motives, and just that internal pressure that comes when people don't agree with you that are around you, the unspoken expectations of other people. But during that, all of that tension, our attitude still has to be that of Christ, and we must communicate trust and forgiveness throughout all of those tensions.
What are some practical things people can do during moments of tension to help maintain that right attitude toward other people? How do you manage the tension to keep your attitude in check?
Well, I think we have to go back and look at Jesus and what he did. And he kept his focus, and sometimes that's a challenge to do. And when you talk about all these tensions, for us, it could be the mere fact that we're in ministry, and family doesn't understand that, or don't like it, doesn't agree with it, or feel like they're competing for time. But Jesus always kept his focus on what his calling was, and that was to fulfill the mission that God had called him to. And I think ultimately that's what we have to do in spite of tensions, whatever they look like, and whatever the source is.
Being centered on Christ is key, but if you let all of these little tensions build up, then you never know what the thing is that's going to be that makes you go into an angry state or respond in a very unkind way. Or we have to find ways to deal with those bad things in our life. Jesus retreated from all of that, and he found time alone to pray. And he had people following him. Sometimes he felt like he was getting chased, as you read some of the stories in the gospel, but he found time alone to recenter. And so I think we have to find ways, and it doesn't seem very spiritual, but having those hobbies that getting out on the golf course for a couple hours to help clear your mind. I think that helps bring us to a point that when we have those tensions, when we have those frustrations, it doesn't bring us over to our boiling point. It's not the straw that broke the camel's back, because we have room in our emotional state to deal with those tensions in a healthy way.
Tension is different than immediate conflict. Tension is last sometimes days, weeks, months. It can last years. And in moments of, at least for me, in moments of tension, I think distractions can be healthy. I think more than ever in those moments, consistency in spiritual practices is critical. The reading the Bible, the praying, the journaling, the going to church, the having the conversations with the right people, because they can take a toll on you after a while. And I think there has to be some self-examination as well, to make sure that we're always asking ourselves the question: what are my motives here? Am I in the right? Do I need to adjust?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if the family's outside going, "You lost your mind," maybe they should have examined themselves and said, "Hey, are we misguided here?"
And I think a practical example, because I have been told that more than one time: you have lost your mind, or you are out of your mind. And usually when I hear that statement coming from those closest to me, it's because my schedule is so hectic and overloaded. And I had a conversation with somebody this week, and I said very candidly, I said, as I was talking about examples of what was on my plate this week, and I said, and some of that is my own doing. It's my own choice. I created some of my own tension. But like Jesus, he got alone, got away, and then he had that inner circle, that smaller group that he confided with and spent time with. Then he ministered to the larger folks, and I think that's a good model for us.
I think everybody in ministry has had this come about. When your calling and purpose seem to conflict with family expectations, how do you navigate that?
I think one of the things that I have found with my own family is that there's no such thing as balancing ministry and family. It is what you are focused on in that moment. And I think it's important when I'm with my family to be with my family, and not to be worrying and always, checking Slack to see what messages and stuff like that. Not that there might be things that pop up that are important I need to deal with, but when I'm with my family, I'm with my family. And then there's times when I'm ministry and my family is here at church, and I don't even see my kids sometimes when they come to church with my husband, because I'm doing what I need to do. I'm talking to people. I'm, putting out tech fires and doing all that on a Sunday morning. So I think that's one way that I've tried to manage that conflict, because there has been times when that conflict between Tyler and I, about when we're both trying to do ministry, and there was tension there, and we had to resolve that and figure out ways to work together on that, and it wasn't easy.
It sure helps when you have family that understand how ministry works. But even when you do, there are times of conflict. There's this tension. We can't go here, we can't do this, or we don't have time together. Intentionality, has to come into play, where at some time you make some adjustments, never at the risk of diminishing ministry, but at the same time realize you have other human relationships and responsibilities too.
Ministry is an unusual situation, at least vocational ministry, in that you do it together and you do it alone, right? So, you come to church together. Often you're busy, as you said, you're doing your thing. But if there are church events, right, you're there, but you also have responsibilities. So it creates a certain tension that the average person can't relate to. And then there are times when you, as in ministry, you intentionally have to make choices that have an impact on your family. It would be nice if, well, there are things that happen here, either decisions that I've had to make or the church had to make, that some people may not like or be offended by, or, that may cause them to leave the church. It may cause them to act in Christ-like ways. The thing about it is, it doesn't just affect me then at that point. It affects my family. It affects my spouse particularly. I can recall how when my kids were younger, things that affected them, and that would be said. And it can create tension that I don't think the average person is aware of or even knows how to navigate. But do you feel more comfortable thinking Jesus' statement about a family splintered as a reference to Satan rather than his own family? Do you lean one way or the other? Is it easier for you to lean one way or the other?
Well, the quote easy one, I think, is to say, it's all the devil. All the tension, all the problem. It's just an attack because we're doing good things and we're trying to live a good life. I think that is absolutely part of it. But the reality is, the other part of it is real life. It's family, it's friends, it's other relationships. And so I think the ultimate answer is both of those come into play.
I think it's probably more about like a warning to the family. Like, if we're going to start feuding, it's going to be like having 1,000 little splinters in your fingers. I don't know. Splinters, that I really thought about what a splinter is, because I had something in my foot for a while, and like it would be fine for a while, and then all of a sudden I would feel it again and I couldn't get it out of my foot. Splinters are like so annoying, but sometimes they linger and sometimes you can't deal with it. So I feel like, we're never going to know sometimes what's an attack of the enemy and what is just human nature.
Right.
So I always try to do my best to take responsibility for what I'm doing and not to put, the devil made me do it.
It doesn't bother me to think that this was Jesus' family. So as you're listening to this, it would have been Sunday before last. But on the first Sunday of this series, I was talking about communication. We used the passage from James, right? And when James is talking about being slow to speak, quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to get angry. And I said, right, so James is Jesus' brother, half brother, ever how you want to say it, That had to be the suckiest job in the whole world, right? And I joke about having baby Jesus as my brother, but that's not a joke, right? You can never live up. You're never going to be first in line. You're never going to be the favorite. You're never going to be the best. Look, Mom, I can make a basket. Oh, look, Mom, I can make 10 baskets, right? I can create the basket and the ball. It's a whole different level. And I have to believe that there was some underlying tension because Jesus, he is a carpenter's son. The reason I joke about my brother is because he got away with murder, not literally, but, he just got away with even still today, my mom babies him.
I, for real, thought you really didn't like your brother for the longest
time. Oh, no, I love my brother.
It took me a long time to kind of realize, like...
It's just a joke.
No, for real, I thought you didn't like your brother.
Yeah, no. Imagine what it was like to have, his daddy is God. Yeah, right. He can turn water into wine. Well, all of those things, they create tension in your own heart And the reason I can joke about it at 57 about my brother, but I resented it when I was younger. I did. I resented the fact that he got a pass on stuff, that mama went out of her way, to do whatever for him. So I can only imagine what James and the other kids felt like, and maybe his own mom, at times, or Joseph, who knows what was going on. So I don't have a problem thinking there was tension there.
And I think James was probably speaking a lot from experience when he wrote that passage as well as other ones. He'd been there and done that. He realized, hey, this is going to work. There's some things you have to do.
James gets a lot of that book of James. I'm going to tell you what may be coming in 2026. I think I'm going to preach an entire series on what it would be like to be Jesus' brother and the things you would learn, because James is a very practical book, right? He doesn't give a lot of deep theology. He gets a lot of flack for not talking about some specific things, but he talks about some very practical things you would learn if Jesus was your brother. When I walked off the stage, that's the first thing I thought, was like, what? That probably was a tough job, but if he's writing from experience, he sure learned a lot of things.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
So, well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around our daily Bible reading from the One Year Bible.